Good evening, folks, and welcome again to Black Star Still Rising, sponsored by the Black Star Project and in the memory of Philip Jackson, the late founder of the Black Star Project. And we got to give our kudos out always to the executive director, Gloria Smith, that continued the legacy of Philip Jackson, the Black Star Project. We've got an exciting program for you this evening. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to introduce this lovely guest that we have. Get a little closer, push this over a little closer. Good. So we'll both stay on camera. Okay. I'm going to introduce you in a few, but you know what, my normal routine, I've got a shout out to my studio producers, Desamani Payne and Rocio Santos, who keep me going and make the program look good, make our guests look good, make us feel comfortable. Always a shout out to them. And I shout out also to my producers, my associate producers, and that is Ellis Taylor and also Dr. Mike Washington are both the associate producers for this program. Welcome here today. As I normally do, Black Star, as you may know, as you remember, we have programs going on all the time, and I use this time to give you a catch-up, an update on what we have today. So I'm going to give you a little information. I want you to get your pencil and paper out so you can take notes. You folks out at the Atlas Center on 79th and Krieger, you folks at the Kroc Center, take notes so you'll know what's going on, and you can pass this information on to your friends, relatives, grands. This is an intergenerational program that addresses intergenerational needs, wants, opportunities. So that's why you need to be taking notes on this. It's going to be important down the line, so get ready for it. First of all, we are continuing, it is continuing, we told you about this last week, Ambassadors of Hope. Going on now, started yesterday at the headquarters of the Black Star Project at 35th and Martin Luther King Drive, better known as the Philip Jackson Parkway. So you'll know where it is now. But it started last week, and it is an ongoing program that is strongly recommended for, let me give you the information, who's it about and who's eligible for it. It's an academic enrichment, maturation, and socioeconomic, social-emotional learning program designed to enhance students' academic skills, culturally, participatory, intergenerational learning experience. Now keep in mind, it may not be for you, but this is for your grands, your nieces, nephews, neighbors down the street. So viva voce, pass this on, pass this information on to whom you think would be appropriate. It's going to be starting with this year's theme, Centering Love with Power in Defining Hope. And it's open to students K through 8th. 5-week program, 5 weeks, that meets Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. Started yesterday, it's continuing, so look forward. I got numbers for you to call. Take this down, 773-285-9600. I'll repeat that. 773-285-9600. You're going to ask for probably Justin Douglas or one of the other directors of the program that will help you and walk you through the process of getting people involved in this program. We got something coming up this week. Got to tell you about this Bronzeville Summer Nights 2024. It's also going to be at 3521 ML King Drive, and that time will be 5 to 9. It's going to be food, live band, adult games, shopping and bopping, a little bopping anyway. This is a collaboration event that is co-hosting a trip with the Black Star Project Sports and Education. We'll be taking a small group of youth to the WNBA All-Star Weekend in Phoenix, Arizona, July 19th to the 21st. Anybody who's been watching the sky like I have, Angel Reese, you don't want to miss this because she's an all-star. She's going to be a great in Chicago WNBA basketball. Now, I got the introductions out the way. Now, I have a friend, a colleague, a person that has brought me into one of her programs, into a book club. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But I bring you a storyteller par excellence, somebody who is just above just storytelling. She tells stories. She writes stories. She records stories, or will be recording stories that you'll be able to get on podcast, and hopefully podcast and video. We have Sandra McCullum. Thank you, Sandra, for having time to come today on this program and to share a bit of, I got to give this little background. Your stories are from NOLA. Folks who don't know NOLA, New Orleans. I'm not going to mess it up. I'm going to let you say it. You tell me.
New Orleans.
Okay, because many other folks mess it up, right?
Yes.
What do they say?
I'm not going to even
You're not
say
even going to say it.
it.
You don't want to pass on bad information. But she
Right.
says it right, and I said New Orleans. And that's not folks who from New Orleans
Right.
say it right, but she'll get me corrected on that. She's a raconteur. A raconteur. She makes stories interesting. We can all tell stories, but we don't make it interesting like Sandra does, both in verbal. If we were in a different studio, I'd be sitting at her feet, listening to her tell stories and enraptured by the stories that are an essence of New Orleans and some things that affect the community, that have stories that must be told. And you'll see in a minute the kind of stories that she'll tell. She's going to whet your appetite. I'm not going to let her tell everything, but she's going to tell some interesting stories. Got to tell you this, she's HBCU trained, bachelor's from Dillard University, rated one of the 10 best HBCUs in the country. Can you say amen to that?
Yes,
And
yes, amen.
you got a master's, one from Loyola.
in Chicago.
In Chicago. And you got at least a couple of masters. So
Yeah, and the other one from Northeastern Illinois.
Northeastern Illinois, okay. Very
And
good.
I'm 3 hours short of one from University of New Orleans.
We're going to get that corrected soon.
No,
3 hours.
I don't want to do it. It's an internship. I don't want to do it.
Okay, anyway, Sandra, come on, start to tell us, one, how you got into storytelling and what is it, journalizing and making these stories start to know.
You know, I don't know if you and I have ever discussed this, but when I was a little girl, both my parents were great storytellers, and my father would entertain us every night with a story when he gave us a bath. But at night when I went to bed, I would dream stories. And as I got older, I would even see the printed word. And they weren't stories I had ever read. And the print would fade away, and I would awaken with such curiosity what happened at
And
the
these are
end of the
dreams.
story. They were dreams.
Okay.
And I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I never took the opportunity to until one day I was here in Chicago, and I had attended a play at the Goodman Theater, and I saw the director of community outreach, who I knew. And she stopped me and she said, "Sandra, we are going to have a writing program for seniors, and I would love for you to take place to participate in
Keep
it."
this in mind now.
Yeah.
Seniors, your life is not open because you're retired.
No.
There's so much more. That's why Sandra brings so much. Go and tell us what happened then with
So
that.
I started the class, and it was like the words just poured from me because they were already in my head. And when I reflect on my childhood, which I think was very rich, I always not only see the imagery in my mind, but I can smell the flowers and the atmosphere, and I can hear things that I wouldn't notice in my adult life, but when I recollect from my childhood. So a lot of my stories take place from my childhood, real incidences.
Come on, tell me about, because you know I always sat and wrapped attention when you were telling your story. Which one are you going to tell us about first?
I want to talk about Sisti, who was my dog when I was a little girl.
Sisti. Go ahead,
Yes.
Sandra. Tell
I'm
me.
going to read it.
Okay, that's cool.
"Sandra, come quickly," my uncle's voice awakened me. Its urgency was so unnerving that I did not take time to brush the sleep from my eyes and put shoes on my feet. The kitchen screen door slammed loudly behind me as I ran outside in my pajamas, through the dewy grass, toppling the dog bowls to the place where my uncle stood over my dog, Sisti. She was heaving and writhing, expelling a white, foamy vomit. I hadn't even greeted him. He was standing in his army uniform home on his first furlough from the army, where he had been since the beginning of the Korean War. His large green duffel bag tossed carelessly upon the ground near Sisti's almost lifeless body was a reminder that his joyful homecoming was overshadowed by a crisis. Daddy came outside and looked at Sisti and handed Uncle Harvey the keys to his car, saying, "She has been poisoned. Take her to the vet on Ferret Street quickly." They gently lifted Sisti and put her on the passenger side of the car. The dew was still thick, cloudy haze hovering above the ground. It had not yet made peace with the morning sun, which was still hiding behind the houses on the other side of the river, waiting to make a fiery entrance. Overwhelmed with sadness, I sank into the wet grass in the spot where Sisti had lain.
How old were you then?
8.
8 years old. Go ahead.
Named after President Roosevelt's granddaughter, my white Spitz dog was my canine sister, a bond between us akin to human sisters. Daddy searched the yard for signs of the succulent and tasty chunk of meat laced with lethal poison. He surmised that the poison giver had cooked the meat and seasoned it with malevolent and bitter intentions, stewing it into a tasty, venomous deception, enticing my dog to eat it before Chi, our other dog, Sisti's son, could devour it. She had to sense that it was poison, Daddy said. She never would have tasted it before offering it to Chi. Mama fed Sisti inside because she wouldn't eat until Chi had had his fill of the food. When Chi was a puppy, Sisti would put as much food in her mouth as she could hold and stand at the kitchen door waiting to be let outside.
I'm going to interrupt you here because of what I wanted to do, Sandra, is to whet our guests, our listeners, our viewers' appetite. I want them to be looking forward to the next episode of Sisti. And either it's going to be here, we get you on a return visit, or it's going to be with a podcast that you're going to have at some point, or a video podcast at some point. So put that aside for now.
Okay.
Remember, Sisti is the one that you want to hear something about. Put that aside for a brief moment. I want to kind of interpose. Tell us about this book club that you were putting together and the books that we started to read already. And it's been exciting for me. Tell us about that.
Well, the book hub is composed of some girls that I taught many years ago who are now probably 50-ish.
No, go ahead.
And we're in a book club together. And I asked Stephen to join because I know he loves to read. Mm-hmm. And so we have a good time. We're going to be meeting once a month. The first book we read was over 800 pages, and it was The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, and it was wonderful.
What a wonderful book. Some of our guests, your members were challenged and get to 800 pages.
Yeah,
all
that's
right?
right. Yeah.
And that's why with the next selection that I recommended, which was James. Much shorter book, maybe about 300 pages, but such an exciting book. When I read the reviews, I said, I got to pass this on to Sandra's book club, and they've been into it. I think I read it in 2 days. It was
Well,
just that good.
I can't wait to get back home. I have 20 more
You
pages
got 20 more
to
pages?
read,
Oh,
and it is
I
so
want to tell you about the
good.
ending. The ending is so gratifying for black folks. The ending that is not normally gratifying, but you'll find out. James. James is the title of the book.
And it's a takeoff from Huckleberry
Huckleberry
Finn.
Finn,
You know,
yes.
it's the Jim who was in Huckleberry Finn. It's a very interesting approach to writing this book.
And Jim became James.
Did you know there's going to be a movie?
Oh,
Spielberg is going to do
who's
a
gonna be in
movie
it?
on
Who's
it.
gonna be in it?
I
You?
don't know. I just read about
It's
the
a knock.
movie.
It's gonna be a knockout. I will tell you what Jim's other name was in the Huckleberry Finn, but we don't say that on the air. But that's why he gravitated to have himself
Yeah.
called James for good reason. He was well read, and white folks didn't know he could read. That was the beauty of it back then. But go ahead,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about. Oh, you got something? Some of where your publications are.
This is, it really was published in a magazine, but it has a nice slick cover and it looks like a book.
You can
And
call it a book.
okay, and I have 5 stories in here.
They must have liked your writing.
Well, they asked me to send 5 samples, and so they
Y'all-
selected all 5. So,
What can you say about that?
but at any rate, I think the one you and I have talked about a number of times that you like was, I was perhaps 5, and my mother used to send me to the grocery
Oh yeah. Yeah.
every day,
This is a story.
particularly in the hot summertime. I hated going to the store.
Hot New Orleans.
And it was through 3 blocks away. And, you know, all your parents teach you not to talk to strangers, which my father drilled me on this all the time. But there was an old man who lived above the store who had a dog.
This was a local grocery store in New Orleans. Okay.
Well, it was, I guess, a supermarket, but a small supermarket, and he lived above.
What ward? What famous ward is this in New Orleans? Is that
Well,
Eighth Ward?
it doesn't have, no.
Oh, none of
No,
those-
we
okay.
lived uptown in a garden
Uptown,
district.
okay.
You know, it didn't have a ward. If it did, I didn't know the name of it.
Okay, but go ahead. Tell us.
And it was highly integrated, very integrated. We were the only black family on our side of the block. You know, we had French, German, Jewish immigrants from France, Creoles, Germans, Italians. It was very integrated.
of personalities.
Oh
and
yeah, well
nationalities. Yes, go ahead.
everybody in New Orleans is a star. We don't have big players.
Everybody. Star and diva.
So anyway, I would stop and play with this man's dog, even though my daddy had told me not to talk to strangers. I didn't think he was a stranger because he was outside the grocery every day. But this one particular day, he made some lewd suggestions to me.
And how old were you about
I,
this
I
time?
was 5,
Okay.
but I was in school, and so I knew these bad words, as the children said, these were bad words. But I pretended that I didn't know what he was talking about. And he even manipulated the body parts of the dog that he had given this
Okay.
name to. And I stood there silently. I remember feeling hot and cold. And I could feel the perspiration running down the backs of my legs.
That's a sign of being petrified, probably.
And I knew that the next time I encountered him, I might be in more danger than I was in this time. So I I got away. I mean, he wasn't restraining me, but I wanted, in my mind, I was thinking I wanted to leave without him knowing I was afraid.
And
I-
5 years old.
Yeah.
That's an awful lot of presence for a young lady. That was the family training. But go.
And
please.
I walked the first block, and I decided that I wasn't going to tell my parents because My father worked on the railroad. He was a government employee, not a railroad employee. And he would be gone about 2 days a week.
Wasn't that postal train?
Yeah.
Okay, go
but
ahead.
He carried a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a government issued gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew my daddy would kill him.
Mm-hmm. Even then?
Oh,
yes.
there was no question in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that if I told,
Mm-hmm.
my family would suffer. And so I began to cry, and an old woman in the next block, who I had always been afraid of because she wasn't contemporary looking. She spoke Creole. She was short, and she wrapped her head in a tillon and wore long, tattered skirts. And she grabbed me before I noticed she was upon me. And she asked me why I was crying, and I just shook my head. I wouldn't tell her. And she took my groceries.
To be continued. To be continued. I wanted to wish you, I knew you'd be listening. Folks are going to call me now and say, you got to get Sandra McCullum back. But we're going to get into, I should tell you this. The interested back. Now I got to tell you a little interested back. This is a woman that had multi-million-dollar projects that she managed down in New Orleans. That tells you a little bit about this background and says to me that folks who have retired and done other things, there's another life for you. Those skill sets that you had over the years, you have a contribution. But I want you to get into Kashmir. I want you to get into one of my favorite stories. Tell us about Kashmir.
Well, Kashmir is a term that comes from the Cajun section of Louisiana. But it's Creole. It's a Creole phenomena also. And over the years, it has been literally translated to mean nightmare. And
say that with me.
Nightmare.
Go ahead.
And some people describe it as sitting on your chest, causing you an inability to speak. Mm-hmm. And when I went to school, the kids used to tell me about witch riding and Kashmir, all kinds of ghostly phenomena. Mm-hmm. But I had already experienced it before I went to school. And my mother didn't believe me. I didn't have anybody to talk to except other kids.
You had this experience. Tell us a little bit about this experience.
I had this experience.
Of Kashmir.
Something very otherworldly, I would say. And so the kids were the ones that gave me the name of what it was.
Okay.
So,
are you liking this, my guests out there at Atlas and Crocs? You liking this? Call me, 312-662-3106. Call me, and we're going to make sure that we get Sandra Starks McCullum back on the program again. But go ahead and tell us a little bit more.
Well, anyway, I have come to think that what happens is somehow when something puts me in danger, I get warnings in my dreams. And it's been happening since I was about 4 years old. And it doesn't have to be me, but it could be somebody close to me. Mm-hmm. And Kashmir.
I wish we had time some of the stories that she tells, but finish as much as we can in these few minutes so we can. I'm whetting your appetite because you're going to come back and you're going to call and get her back on the show. Go ahead.
So, it's happened multiple times, and I tell them in stories. I, give the experience in stories. Once, it was a warning about a pretending automobile accident with my son on a bicycle who was very reckless when he was a little boy, younger than 10. Uh-huh. And then other events too. I don't want to give too much away. So you have to
listen to your spirit too. That's one of the things that you've been doing since you were young, very, very young.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I got to make this last announcement about the Hope Project still going on. Call 773-285-9600. Look for that. Call and talk to Justin Douglas. You can leave a message. That's one of the places you can leave a message and people will call you back. And that's the Black Star headquarters. What's going on right now, some things going to be happening Wednesday. The email address is justin@blackstarproject.org. That's Justin, Justin, @blackstarproject.org. Write that down. Be on the phone tomorrow because you can get your son, your nephew, your grandchild in on this program before it's open. But if you're as excited as I am, you're going to be looking for Sandra McCullum, the Nolans. Oh, I shouldn't play with you like that. You're going to make me. I'm going to make you mad if I say New Orleans is the wrong thing.
The only people who say it live in Chicago.
Chicago. Well, you won't be saying Chi-Town to me either. I don't want to have you talking about Chi-Town. Nobody in Chicago says Chi-Town. All right.
Okay.
Sandra, thank you for being with me today. It's been a pleasure. I just want more time. I need an hour program to talk about some of the things and the stories that you can tell us. And I'll tell you some more about the book club. We might be looking to start book clubs just like Oprah did. And you can say now, you knew when Sandra McCullum started the book club, and that James, the movie, is going to be coming out soon. You heard about it first here. Spielberg, was it Spielberg?
Yeah.
Spielberg told you not to.
Steven Spielberg.
Didn't he tell you not to let it
He
go?
didn't give me any details, but it was in the paper.
No, you didn't have to say that. You could have said, as a storyteller, that Spielberg called you and said, here's what's coming out as your result of this. Have your book club people start to talk about James.
Yeah.
And it's a wrap. Thank you for being with us today. It went too fast. But at least I whet your appetite for something so exciting. And this has been a great evening today. Sandra, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen. This was wonderful. I enjoyed it.
Even though it went fast.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do this today. I promise, Frazier, I'm not going to drop the mic.